Let's bring in our panel for the first time today. Joe Moreno, a former Republican Party lawyer, federal prosecutor, national security analyst, and Democratic strategist and former State Department official David Tafuri. It is very good to see you both. Joe, let's start with the situation in Iran. If you look at President Trump's Truth Social statement today, it doesn't appear things are going well if both sides are adding demands to negotiations.
Hey, Sumi. Well, I don't think things are going well. I've always been highly skeptical that any deal with Iran is reachable because they're not going to honor it. And so as a person who spent much of my career as either a counterterrorism prosecutor or in the Army, I believe that combat operations are probably inevitable. It's the only language that Iran understands. And I am frustrated, and I've given my own skepticism that the president hasn't generated the public the trust, the congressional approval, and enunciated a plan to get out of there. But I do think, unfortunately, we're going to keep resulting in combat operations because Iran is not going to meet any obligations or agree to any terms.
But Joe, was that the miscalculation that President Trump made, was to think that he could get some sort of better deal with Iran?
Possibly. I know that he thinks himself as a great deal maker, and I think that's very questionable, and I'll be the first one to admit that. See, I think that people are saying this was a poor judgment because of political reasons. I give it the opposite. I give Donald Trump a lot of credit that he did this despite political opposition, despite the fact that it will likely hurt him and Republicans in general in November. And he's doing it anyway because he knows this is really important for us, for Israel, and the rest of the world.
Yeah, after a bruising and protracted confirmation hearing in the U.S. Senate, the man who used to be President Trump's personal lawyer has finally been sworn in today as the new Attorney General of the U.S. Todd Blanche was approved for the post by a razor-thin majority of 50 votes to 49. Two Republican senators broke ranks to join the Democrats in opposing his nomination.
Yeah, just before we came on air, the White House press secretary posted pictures, if you can see them there, of the swearing-in ceremony in the Oval Office. Now, many who oppose Todd Blanche's nomination have expressed concern about the politicisation, as they see it, of the US Justice Department, which has historically taken pride in its independence from the White House. Now, the man who runs it is the same man who defended Donald Trump in several important trials, including one where he faced charges of covering up hush money payments to the adult film star Stormy Daniels.
Now critics fear that Todd Blanche will further weaponize the Justice Department against President Trump's political enemies, pursuing the president's personal interests instead of the nation's.
Well, Donald Trump, however, has no doubt that Todd Blanche is the right man to replace Pam Bondi, who was dismissed, you may remember, in April. The president has referred to Todd Blanche as, quote, a very talented guy. So let's go back to our panel, Joe Moreno and David Tafuri. Joe, how do you see this appointment? Is it a purely political appointment which besmirches the reputation of the Justice Department? Because, as I say, it has historically been seen as independent of the White House.
Ben, full disclosure, I know Todd Blanche very well. We were law partners together and were friends for about 10 years. So I bring a personal bias in the fact that I believe he is an outstanding lawyer. I've seen him in court. I know him personally, and I have no doubt he's committed to the ethics required for the position and for us attorneys. As far as the politicization, I mean, remember, William French Smith was Ronald Reagan's personal lawyer for years and then served as his attorney general for 4 years after that, right? Eric Holder served as an advisor to Barack Obama's presidential campaign in 2008 and then was his attorney general. So I understand the legitimate arguments regarding how Todd has conducted himself as acting attorney general, and there are some legitimate concerns. But as far as the personal defense lawyer argument, these cases are closed. He knows he has to recuse himself from dealing with them. So I've never seen that as a problem. In fact, I understand Donald Trump's desire to have an attorney general he can trust because he's been burned in the past by those he couldn't. So I do not see this as a problem. I think it's a fantastic choice as our next attorney general.
David, what do you think of that point?
Well, he passed the Senate by the narrowest of margins, and he really had to walk a tightrope here. He needed to reassure President Trump that he's going to be Trump's chief lawyer and he's going to do the things that Trump wants him to do, which apparently means pursuing Trump's political enemies. And at the same time, he had to reassure the Senate that he was going to stay within the bounds of the law, that he was going to be ethical, that he wasn't going to support the slush fund for convicted criminals. And I think the question now is, how long will he actually stay as Attorney General? Because he is bound by ethics. He's already, or his lawyers, and I think possibly he, have already been referred to the Bar Committee for disciplinary action related to that IRS action, because the judge is saying it was a sham action and the settlement was a sham. And he will also potentially face disciplinary action if he goes after some of Trump's political enemies without sufficient evidence to do so. And courts keep denying these cases and dismissing these cases. So while Blanche has made it through, and he is now the Attorney General, I question how long he can remain as the Attorney General, especially if he wants to keep his bar license.
Let's just show you some pictures, live pictures, because Donald Trump is there in the White House. He's been signing some executive orders. But Joe Moreno, I hear what you say about you think Todd Blanche, you know him, you think he's a very good lawyer and so on. But surely there are lots of good lawyers who could have done this job. You don't have to have somebody who is so close to the president.
But I mean, that's who the president trusts, right? I mean, Todd took a huge risk in defending Donald Trump personally, knowing that half the country will probably hold that against him. And it worked out, right? And he successfully defended him in cases that ran from weak to absolutely absurd. And so I fully understand that when you look at Trump's first term, and he put the Justice Department in the hands of Jeff Sessions, who then turned it over immediately to Rod Rosenstein, who turned the investigation immediately over to Bob Mueller, who ran with Russiagate for 2 years, and it got completely out of control. That's what happens when you put enforcement powers into people you don't know, who don't know how to handle the Justice Department. He knows Todd. Todd knows the job. He served as deputy for the last year and a half. So I have no problem. And as far as bar referrals, bar committees are a joke. Anybody can refer anybody for anything. That's not going anywhere. He's going to be a great Attorney General.
Joe, thank you very much indeed. And David, thank you very much as well.
All right, we're going to take a short break, but we will be keeping our eye on the White House and President Trump, as we said, with executive orders on childhood vaccination. So we'll bring you any lines that come to us out of that. We're back in a few minutes. Stay with us here on The Context USA. Joe, we know the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is a known vaccine skeptic. Does it concern you that we're seeing this executive order?
No. And I think if we've learned anything from the COVID debacle and what we've just learned from Dr. Fauci these last few weeks is that there's nothing wrong with challenging conventional wisdom. Sometimes it's right and sometimes it's very wrong. And so I don't think skepticism is a bad thing, especially when you're dealing with rush to market things like the COVID vaccine. Now, I get it. MMR has been around a long time, but I don't think that we really understand the long-term effects of these shots in terms of cancer, in terms of infertility, in terms of all kinds of things. And so if it means taking a step back and rethinking things that we've done for a long time just because we've done them for a long time, I don't think there's a problem with that. And I think, yes, if there's more disease, people will hold President Trump accountable, which is how the political system works. It's just recommendations, too. It's not mandates here.
But, Joe, I mean, that link between immunizations and autism has been widely debunked by the scientific community around the world for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's true, but I'm just saying that being skeptical about taking things into your body is not a bad idea.
But sorry, if it's not true, why would you be skeptical about it?
Because we don't know what else it could do. So, okay, maybe it's not believed to lead to autism, but I don't know what else it could lead to. So I want to do a cost-benefit analysis. What is the benefit that is giving me, protecting me against MMR versus the possible downsides it could bring? And so I'm not saying don't do it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with once in a while questioning things that we've done for a long time just because we're assuming it's the right thing because we've done it for so long.
We do. We'll come back to the panel in a moment on this, because if you're driving here in the U.S. and have the sense you're being watched, you might be, at least your license plate might be.
Yeah, police in the US have for years relied on a network of cameras to track a car's license plate number. One of the biggest providers of those cameras is Flock Safety. Now, the company's website shows it has more than 80,000 license plate readers installed right across the United States.
In recent weeks, the company has faced growing scrutiny after reports of police officers abusing the technology. So, for example, according to police in North Carolina, an officer there was arrested for using the license plate reader to track her boyfriend's ex-wife.
Yeah, and that has sparked a response. The activist organisation called DFlock has been mapping out the company's camera system, and there have been heated city council meetings. And more than a dozen local municipalities have now decided to stop using Flock cameras. But the technology has fueled a wider bipartisan debate about the right to privacy.
Yeah, critics of this type of technology say it's being used to carry out surveillance on people on their way to sensitive sites like a place of worship or a demonstration. They say the companies store their data even if that's only temporary. Supporters, on the other hand, argue this technology is needed for effective law enforcement.
And that whole debate comes amid a debate too about the role of technology more widely in the United States, with the rise of artificial intelligence and the data centres needed to power them.
Let's put this to Joe and David. Joe is a former federal prosecutor. I'll ask you this first. Are you concerned about the use of this type of technology?
You know, Sumi, Ben used the word bipartisan. I think it's interesting that when an issue comes where both ends of the political spectrum actually agree, and you have sort of those on the left that are less supportive of the police, and you have those on the right that are pro-police but more libertarian, both saying maybe this is going a little too far. And I know David can appreciate this as a lawyer. People come to us and say, is this legal? And the answer is it's legal. I mean, all the Flock camera footage is allowed in court. The question is more of a policy one. Do we want this level of surveillance? And it's a perfectly good debate about how invasive we want. Where does law enforcement end and the right to privacy really begin?
Do you go along with that? Should there be a tightening of regulations on everything from security cameras to AI?
It's a tough call. I mean, we don't have a GDPR type equivalent here, right? And this is a function of federalism, where you have 50 states, all of whom have very different thoughts about how things like these cameras and data privacy and sharing in general should be done, which is why we have not coalesced around a federal data privacy standard. And so David's right. I mean, this is a policy question. States, voters, elected officials have to come together and figure out how should we use this technology properly, responsibly, balancing people's privacy rights with the desire to enforce the law and enforce safety and protect people. So it's a legitimate debate. It's one that's not going to be solved easily.
Joe, I guess the argument can also be made that people are worried about their privacy, but wear Meta glasses and take pictures of other people, perhaps, or put all of their data online anyways.
I mean, look, a police officer can stand on the side of the road and use a radar gun and use a camera and view people's license plates. So you can say it's kind of the same thing. Now, granted, you extrapolate that over many, many cars, archive the data. But it's really just the same idea. And so again, you can say, I'm okay with the police officer spotting individual cars that might be speeding. I'm not okay with this massive accumulation of license plate data. And so I completely understand people's concerns. And I think this is one of those great areas where probably people on both sides of the aisle can have a debate that's not really partisan driven, but much more about safety and responsibility.
Okay. Joe Moreno, David Tafuri, thank you both for sharing your insights, your perspectives with us today on The Context USA. Great to have you on. And for Ben and myself, thank you so much for watching The Context USA. Ben will be back, in a few moments with an update on all the latest.
Yep, see you in a moment. Thank you very much for your company. Goodbye.